Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Ride Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're going to be working on Brenda's Roadster. That's probably the biggest thing we have to work on this week. We've got a lot of stuff out right now, a few things getting coated and cleaned to work on the Camera Ladies chassis. Ultimately, the Camera Ladies chassis, we're going to be putting it aside for a short time. The weather here is really cold. The next thing we need to do to it basically is clean it up and get it ready for paint, and more than likely I'm not going to be able to do that for probably another 4 or 5 weeks. So we'll set that up on its side, out of its way. The goal with Brenda's Roadster though is to get everything bolted down, lined up. Everything looks like it's going to bolt up just fine, everything cleared, didn't scratch anything, all that kind of fun stuff. But we're going to put the steering column into it, and ultimately what I'm really hoping to do before the end of this episode is get this car over into the other building where I normally do finish work on assembly and stuff, and then we'll get back to doing some fabrication in this shop. If all of that goes well, hopefully I'll be able to introduce you to a new project this week, so stay tuned and follow along. Well, today we're playing around with some rims and tires a little bit. We kind of concluded that the chrome spoke rims that we're using were just a little bit too small, and because they were 5 on 5.5 bolt pattern and the car had 5 on 4.5, it required us to use an 1.25 inch spacer, which then kind of, made the tire stick out too far from the body. So what I did, I had some tires that I used as rollers over in the other garage. We use them to move some of the cars around as we're building them. So I had some rear tires there that I think they're 255/70 R15s, and they are 5 on 4.5 bolt patterns. So I put those on the back, and I think if you saw the previous video and the car with the chrome spoke wheels onto it, you'll notice that it actually looks a little bit better. The tires actually sit a lot closer to the body, and then also they fill up the wheel well a little bit better. One thing, I guess, if you do some research on Highboys, I think most of the time the guys are using like a tire that's 30, 31 inches tall. So although this is a better choice, we may actually have to go to like a little taller tire, maybe like a 265/75, either on a 15 or 16 inch rim. And then on the front, the front size tire is really good. We're kind of happy with that. But again, because we're using the chrome spoked rims that are 5 on 5.5 bolt pattern, we have to use those adapters, which makes them stick out a little wider. What I'm going to do right now, I am going to put my other roller tires on the front, which are just plain Jane steel rims. And then I'm going to send a picture to the owner, and we're going to talk about what we're going to do next. So I think he's going to come up with something else, another style rim, and certainly probably more of a big and little to give us that stance that we're looking for, that the Highboys, kind of deserve, or that's both of us are the same mindset. That's what we kind of like. Another thing that happened today, we're going to introduce another project. So a friend of mine bought a 32 5-window coupe. On a previous episode, we showed picking it up. That 5-window coupe was in pretty rough shape, not as bad as the ones that we built here previously. He also picked up this particular frame, not this one. This one here is the Camera Ladies frame on its side. We're going to be working on that a little later. I've just set it aside there for now, but this one here. So this frame was on another hot rod. It's an original 32 frame, kind of butchered up a little bit, unfortunately. Some bad welds onto it. Previously, it had a Jaguar suspension front and rear, and it was cut off. I think frame horns were welded on and a few things like that. So what the plan is for this, the 32 5-window coupe that he bought, the sub rails were pretty shot onto it. So he went out, he bought a set of United Pacific frame rails, the sides, got those delivered. He's got a reproduction floor and a couple cross members. So what he's asked us to do over the next month or two or three is to help him get the sub rails all put together and put on and that floor sorted out, and then get it ready to put the 32 5-window coupe back on and reattach the A and the B pillars and get the doors open and shutting, and maybe a little bit more. But here's another 32 Ford coming in the Coldstream Rod Shop for some more work. Well, unfortunately, it's storming here. Weather doesn't look very good for the next few days. Like I said, ideally, we want to move the Roadster over into the other finished building, and that's where we will do the final assembly. So for now, we are not going to do any fab work or grinding or drilling or anything sort over here. I'm just going to start putting bits and pieces back on the Roadster until we can move it over to the other building. So for now, we've got the windshield frame back on. It looks as though it's gone back on the same way that it did before. There was a little bit of an issue from side to side. Had to put some spacers underneath the stanchions. Not sure if it's related to the actual windshield stanchion, windshield frame, or the body itself, but that's one of the things. I mean, when you're putting one of these things together, reproduction parts are good. Your reproduction body, it's good, but you got to basically make it fit, unfortunately. So got that done, got all the bolts into the body, everything all tightened down, and made sure that the doors open and shut. Got everything torqued in place, the firewall bolts, everything there. And then around the back, just because I could, no special reason whatsoever, we put the taillights on her, and the hood latch. We'll continue with some of the handles and all that stuff, and just keep plugging away over here while we can and just wait the weather out. Today I've been working on putting the steering column back in. It had been previously fitted and everything fit well. The one thing is, after you disassemble and reassemble, things can change. They really shouldn't change too much, but sometimes the final fit, you got to make an adjustment. Not too much in this case. Things went together well. The one thing I wanted to do was make a gasket for the firewall. So I wanted to make a little gasket to go around the steering column against the firewall and fit underneath the bracket there. So what I've made the motive before is just basically a pair of roofing gasket, something where you would have I just basically get one of these from the hardware store. The rubber is actually quite pliable and used to being outside and weather resistant and everything else. So maybe there's something else you can use, but this is a pretty simple piece of material that I can make a cut out of, cut a circle into it. If I do it wrong, I got plenty of material to make another one, but essentially I'll use this to make, I used it to make that gasket for the steering column, and then what I'm going to do is, once I get some 3M glue back in, I'm going to make another piece of rubber gasket to go over the holes here for the brake and the clutch pedal. I didn't do it from up underneath. I'm going to do it from top. We're going to just basically put the weather stripping glue. It's a 3M. You can get it yellow or black. Had to order some, so once that comes in, I'll do that. And the same thing for the cowl vent. I started fitting the cowl vent and then realized that I had run out of the glue, so I'll use the same glue to glue that cowl vent in. Now on the front section, for putting the universal joints back in again, just go over and make sure that you've got no binding, everything fits good, make any adjustments you need to. And then what I've mentioned this previously, like when I make these shafts, I actually drill a hole in the shaft to match where the Allen key, the set screw goes in. And then that way you've got like a mechanical lock once that set screw goes in there. Never had one of these comes out, but I just want to make sure that it just doesn't. And then with the set screws, I use red thread locker for the set screw, and I use red thread locker for the nut. Now somebody's going to curse me, I guess, once if they ever have to take it out. But the point being, it's steering. I don't want it to come loose. So anyways, everything is in on that. Everything is Loctited, tightened. There's no binding, there's no nothing. So we're good to go on the steering column. I'm just gonna go to the next assembly thing, that whatever we can do to get this done before we go over to the other building. We've got another freaking storm coming in, so it's gonna be still a few more days before we can move this to the other building. So we're just gonna carry on over here. So today the weather is still not cooperating with us, so we still can't move Brenda's Roadster over to the other garage and do the switch. So there is no fabricating work here that we're going to be getting onto in the next few days. Going to carry on working on her car, getting a few of the small stuff all sorted out. One of the things we had to do was put a 6-bolt steering wheel adapter on the steering column. That was relatively simple to do. It was something we just picked up off of eBay and just traded out the big 9-bolt one for a 6-bolt adapter. It just happens to be black, but no problem. Anyways, the reason why we did that was that they had picked out this nice steering wheel that they wanted to put on, and it was a 6-bolt. So that actually went quite smoothly. The other thing I went over, and amongst all the parts, we have a gas pedal and the gas pedal throttle linkage, the cable there. We're going to try hooking that up. And then in the box below it is the wiring harness. Probably what we'll do is put the fuse block in and run out some of the major cables from front to back in the engine, see where they're going to lay. Can't hook all of it up, but we'll start running that. Another thing I wanted to start working on was that we had bought a radiator quite some time ago for the flathead. You can see it right here. It is sitting in an original 32 Ford grill shell, just because I was trying to see, how well it would fit without getting the painted one. Bought many of these radiators off eBay before for myself and a bunch of friends. Really had a lot of success, both for ourselves and for them. But in this particular case, it got caught. In this particular case, I guess in China, they must put the drain on the front for a 32 Ford radiator, as you can see here. So that's a problem for us. We're going to have to actually get that cut off and then welded and then move the drain up to the back here, either right there or right here, but somewhere is where it should be. Otherwise, the radiator looks to be pretty good shape. Like I said, we've had a lot of success. It was only the first one that I bought over 10 years ago that leaked. The rest of them we bought over time, never had a problem with them until now. So, but that's one of the risks of buying stuff off eBay, as almost all of you know. Most of the time you get pretty good stuff, but once in a while you get a curveball. So we have a curveball and have to go get this fixed. The other thing is that we had, with that radiator, one of the plans was to put it in and then hook up the radiator support rods, and then there's brackets that go on the firewall, and then that's the hood hinge that goes on with the front and rear brackets. So right now that's going to be shelved until we can get the radiator drain holes fixed up. So for now, I'm going to work on the gas pedal and put some of the wiring in. So I've got the gas pedal out and the throttle cable out, starting to get it installed. The fortunate thing, the throttle cable is a low-carb brand throttle cable, so it's a pretty high quality throttle cable. It's not a knockoff. The pedal is your typical spoon type pedal, which is, it worked with those many before, knockoff or not knockoff, they work the same way. The one thing that I realized is that we don't have a bracket here to hold the throttle cable in place. Now, you can probably order one, but we'll get it in a week or two or whenever. And more than likely it's like 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks, probably 50 bucks by the time we get it here. So I went out off of our Model A and a 32 Ford pickup, took a quick look at what this thing looked like, and it looks something like that. So I made a little cardboard template of what I wanted to make, which is basically this piece here. We don't need the return spring, the return line here for the kickdown cable for the automatic transmission, because we're running a standard. All we need basically is this little metal piece here to hold the throttle cable in place. So like I said, we made up the, well, there's a picture of one right here without the kick down. So made one out of cardboard, and then I came over here and so far we've made one out of metal. So as you can see right there, and I've got a little, so the screw is a little long right now, but it's an adjustment screw to keep it from rotating off of this nut. So the throttle cable will come in here, go through there, and then hook up to a little ball here on the carburetor. So what I'm going to do, more than likely, I think I'm going to put a little tiny dab of weld in there. We'll paint this up and maybe divert a little bit, and then we'll have ourselves a throttle cable bracket. Well, today while I was waiting for the paint to dry on a throttle bracket that I made up, I decided to start putting the wiring harness in. I am not going to get this thing wired in this episode. It's probably going to take a couple, mainly because we don't have all of the pieces, but we've got all the wires. The wiring kit that was supplied was one of the generic ones. I'm not sure if it's Easy Wire or something, but it was a 20 circuit kit. We probably only need 12 or less for a Roadster, but anyways, it's a 20 circuit kit. I've got some wiring diagrams for other kits I've done. Most of this stuff is all labeled. Unfortunately, the labels on the wires aren't that easy to see for my eyes. But anyways, what we're doing right now, we're laying it out. I'm separating out the wires. Like right now, we've got the wires here, going to go to the headlights and to the signal lights. I've got the wires that are going to go to the engine. Ultimately, what I'm going to do with those is I will make a hole in the firewall, put a grommet into it and fish it through. And then the ones going to the lights will come more than likely down through the floor and then along the frame rail up to the lights. That's the plan. A lot of these wiring kits have super long wires, so we're just trimming the excess off of those right now. I have the fuse panel mounted up inside there, and I've started to separate out the gauge wires here are coming through the steering wheel. These here are extra accessory wires, which I'm ultimately going to cut short, and I'll put like a little blue clip on the end of it. I will then coil that up into like a coil, making sure each wire has a label onto it. So if in the future, if this car gets sold to somebody else or whatever, they'll be able to undo that coil and hook up whatever. I don't think they're going to hook up some of the things like the dome light in a Roadster and power windows because it has no windows. Windshield wiper, they might hook that up, but most of the time these Roadsters, we just have like a little mechanical windshield wiper onto it. And then this other harness here is going to the backlights. And again, those backlight harness, I'll probably come up along the firewall and then down through the center of the body, or might come off to one of the sides here, just depending on where I can put it so that, you know, you don't step on it all the time. A couple cars I've done for the back wires, I've run them down the center. I've also come down through the tunnel, up underneath, and then up through a hole. Anyways, we'll figure that out. So now that I've got them kind of separated out, I'll start putting holes in the firewall. Like I said, we'll trim some of these up, and then we'll kind of get to the next step of the wiring. As you can see here, we've got something else blocking the middle of the garage. I committed to doing another project for the owner of Brenda's Roadster. It's going to be a 34 Ford 5-window coupe, if I'm not mistaken. But the first step was to get the frame here, much like I've done for some of the other projects for him. The frame, it looks as though we're going to be set it up for transverse leaf spring suspension in the back, likewise for the front. But we're going to have to put like a center cross member into it and a whole bunch of stuff. This will be a future project. So right now, I still can't move Brenda's Roadster over to the other building because The driveway is utterly and completely iced up. The weather's still not cooperating, but what we're going to do is we're going to keep on working on whatever I can on Brenda's Roadster. In some cases, like we found out with the radiator, we couldn't go any further. We've got to go get it fixed. But we'll just work on whatever we can until we can get it moved over to the other building. But like I say, in the meantime, we're starting to get some more projects lined up for fabrication work here in this garage. 33, 34 chassis and another 32 chassis. As I mentioned a few times in this video, the ultimate goal is to move Brenda's Roadster over into this garage, but as you can see, we kind of have a bit of a traffic jam. We've got the International Roadster body in the frame over here. We've got the Camera Ladies Roadster body over here. We've got our Model A, the 32 pickup. And then over there, we have the 58 Ford cab that we finished a little while ago. The plan had been to send it back to my friend, but unfortunately, because of weather and everything else, we've just not been able to get it back to him. So what the current plan is now, and I've mentioned it, is that we want to move the 58 Ford cab over there into the building where Brenda's Roadster is, and then move Brenda's Roadster over here, which is going to be like much more of a clean space over here for doing assembly work. I've always done the assembly on the cars over here, and then we've kept the other garage as a fabrication kind of shop to fix parts and put things together, and we do some painting for our own stuff over there. So what I'll do, I'll show you outside, and I'll show you why we can't do the move. Now, I know there's folks across Canada and Saskatchewan and the West, and even in the Western states, you've seen a lot more colder weather than we have. But one of the things we are challenged with is, like, we don't have as much snow, but we've got all this ice. We get a little bit of freezing rain and whatnot, and what we've seen is over the past 6 or 8 weeks, it's just not been above zero, so it's kind of stayed typical East Coast weather. You know, it snows and then it rains away and then, you know, kind of clears up, but we've not had that break this year. So I don't want a chance pushing some heavy vehicles across this ice and one of us going on the ground and hurting ourselves. Unfortunately, a friend of mine just was trying to do a similar thing, and down he went and hurt his arm pretty bad. So we're just going to hold up here, wait for the weather to give, and it's going to break eventually. And then we're going to continue working on Brenda's Roadster over here for now, and then we'll wait and get working on some of the fabrication stuff as soon as we can. Okay, this is as far as we can get for this week. Unfortunately, because we're working on one project, a lot of stops and starts, flushing out issues, sending stuff out, finding issues with like the radiator. We didn't anticipate that issue. I think I told everybody the drain plug is on the opposite side. I've never seen a 32 Ford radiator delivered like that. So there's a solution. It's going to go out to the gentleman that owns this. He knows someone that welds aluminum really well, so we're going to plug it up on one side and turn it over to the other. But we'll work on that later. As far as the things I could get done here, we've got the accelerator pedal in. It's just your stereotypical little spoon style gas pedal like you see on a hot rod. So we've got the linkage hooked up to the carburetor, no problem. And I've got some of the wires run, but right now I still have to decide where I'm going to run them, whether I'm going to run 2 holes in the firewall, one for the engine wires, one for the lights, or just run everything through the same hole. Tell me what you think about that, what you would do. I think I'm going to run them through 1 hole. Normally I run them through 2 but on the cars where I've run it through 2 holes, as in I would put the lights, the wire and the lights down here running to the front and the engine stuff going there, I only had a brake pedal to deal with. So in this case, we get a brake and a clutch pedal, so there's not a lot of room there. So what I'm thinking on this one, we should run just 1 hole probably over here and then have 2 harnesses coming out to the front. But we'll work on that next week. And then this week, even though we couldn't get the 32 Ford Roadster moved over to the other building because of the ice and everything else, we still managed to squeeze 2 projects in here, or at least the beginnings of them. Like I said, this one is going to be a 34 Ford Coupe. This one over here is going to be a 32 5-window coupe. We're going to work and help the gentleman with this. He's a friend of mine. He bought a 32 Ford Coupe that we helped him pick up a while ago. He wants some help with the subframe and some of the sheet metal work, getting things squared up. And then, of course, going over the frame and helping with a few different welds and stuff. So we'll get him sorted out. But we can't work on any of this stuff until we can actually move the Roadster over to the other building. So anyways, that's it for this week. Come on back next week and see what we're up to. Oh yeah, please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Send me your comments and come on back next week.